Your mindset has to get ahead of the paycheck. Like, you can have all the skills, you can learn the language, you can learn how to sell or how to build a business, you can learn the actual skills and even take the actions necessary to be a successful entrepreneur. But if your head isn't in the game and you're just a highly skilled person who's stuck.
Why are people so damn afraid all the time?
There's so many reasons, and everybody's life is different. But I believe that they're, number one, a lack of awareness. You know, they haven't done the work. They haven't been self-reflective. Fear is a habit, just like any other habit. And it plays such an important role in how we move through our life and how we, Secrets to Millionaires. It's chapter 1 in the book. Like, I start the book on fears, and I believe there's 5 universal fears: fear of change, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of success, fear of failure. And I don't presume to say that everyone is dealing with all 5 of those fears. Maybe it's 1 or 2 fears at different times.
Can you say them again real quick? I'm actually going to take notes, if that's okay.
Sure. Fear of change. People don't like change.
Right.
Fear of judgment. What will people say? Fear of rejection, because we all want to be liked. Fear of failure. And fear of success.
Success. Yeah. Ooh, that one's so curious to me, but so true.
Curious to everyone, even people who are dealing with fear of success. I mean, if you want to go down that bunny trail for a second, I've given this a lot of thought. I haven't experienced fear of success personally, but I've witnessed it in other people. And I've come to believe that it comes from a couple of different ways. Either how you were raised, something happened when you were young. Like, maybe little Jeff said, I'm going to go sell, more whatever than anybody else, more Boy Scout cookies or Girl Scout cookies, or I'm going to ride my bike to the top of the mountain, or I'm going to get the lead in the school play. Like, you said something grand, and the person you said it to said something to the effect of, no, you're not. Like, what makes you think you're going to do that? Or boys don't do that, or girls don't do that, or nobody in our family's ever done that, or don't get bigger than your britches, something like that. And they've carried that tape of wanting to do something grand, but I'm not the person to do that. And so if you've ever read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, the first half of his book, he talks about having an upper limit problem. This is where I think so many live, with this upper limit problem. They only give themselves permission to get so good at something, and then they put a ceiling on themselves. And this is a big part of fear of success.
It's interesting that of those fears, I mean, change, judgment, rejection, failure, success. Fear of success is the one I think that I've had to grapple with the hardest, because I noticed this recurring pattern. And I'm sure in your work, you work with a lot of people where people they're doing fine, it's going well, and they get to a point, and then it always seems to unravel, and then they do it again. And it's like this cyclical, what do they call that? Oscillation life cycle, whether it's relationships or business or money or even their health. Like, they seem to repeat this same cycle. And it's I guess that's the upper limit. They hit their upper limit.
A solution is personal development. My analogy for this is lottery winners. We've all heard the stories of people who won the lottery, life-changing opportunities, and how many of them within a very short period of time have not only lost the money, but are more in debt than when they originally. And I believe that the component here is, at the time that they won the lottery, that their self-worth, their self-deserve, their self-esteem never rose to the level of this wealth. And so usually unconsciously, they're making decisions to make sure that their wealth comes back down to that comfort level of deserve, esteem, accountability. It's just fascinating, really, when you think about it. And it's just the lack of doing the work, the lack of the personal development, the lack of awareness of what drives them.
Yeah, I remember reading, I've obviously, as the creator of Entre, I work with a ton of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs, and we do a lot of this work. I say, you think you want this thing, you idolize or you idealize this poster image in your mind of what it would look like to be a successful entrepreneur. But a lot of times there's a whole lot of work that needs to be happening in parallel to the actual work of building the business, so that you don't get to a certain point where you sabotage it to get back to your own self-image. And I remember, and I've shown people data like that thing you said about lottery winners. Like, yeah, we've heard the stories, but those aren't just one-off stories. Statistically, someone is far more likely to go broke in the next 5 years if they won the lottery than if they didn't. Like, how is that even possible? Like, yeah, except it is. It's the data. The data doesn't lie. You're far more likely to go broke once you win the lottery.
Again, it's because they haven't done the work. As you were saying, you do a lot about mindset. I work with entrepreneurs and salespeople all day, every day. And I always tell them, your mindset has to get ahead of the paycheck. Just has to. If you're not prepared to, what did Jim Rohn always say? Work harder on yourself than your business or your job. Work harder on yourself. Like, you can have all the skills, you can learn the language, you can learn how to sell or how to build a business. You can learn the actual skills and even take the actions necessary to be a successful entrepreneur. But if your head isn't in the game and you're just a highly skilled person who's stuck, or like you say, going backwards.
Yeah, a friend of mine says the world is full of broke geniuses, and they're just waiting for somebody who brings a willingness to take risk and who brings an unreasonable amount of confidence. And then when you take a broke genius, which the vast majority of the world are broke geniuses, right? Because we all have this native genius. We're all geniuses in our own way, but most of us are broke. And you couple it with somebody that can inject some risk taking and some certainty or confidence. That's when magic happens. And ideally, through personal development, you can do that for yourself.
Agree 100%. This
So
is why I make 30 minutes every day and have for years to do. I have a personal development practice. And if you actually read interviews of some of the most successful billionaires in the world, to a one, they all talk about having some form of personal development practice where they take time every day to work on themselves.
So yeah. And I mean, I'd like to think I'm just smart enough to learn through imitation, and I've copied a lot of those people, and it's been an incredible breakthrough for me. In fact, I would argue, having grappled with my own fears of success in the last 3 to 5 years, I've finally broken through a lot of that. And most of it hasn't been from some like magical epiphany that I had sitting in a therapist's office. It's actually been through routine, just getting into a cadence of doing a daily work on self. A lot of it was physical. It was getting in an exercise routine. It was getting into I constructed my morning routine to check a few boxes, and that seemed to create the momentum that made success more of an assumption than an achievement.
Agreed.
Because I was just doing what successful people do, you know?
Yep. But it's the consistency plays a role in that, Jeff. I mean, I have a whole training I do on all the benefits of consistency, especially for salespeople or entrepreneurs. The benefits. Some people just think, oh, I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to have a habit. But when you think about the many benefits of being consistent, it's not just you're going to get more skilled, right? It's not just as you do it over and over, your language is going to get better, your skills are going to get better. Emotionally, you're going to be more confident, you're going to be more energized, you become more brave, your vision gets bigger, your courage gets stronger. There's so many benefits to being consistent and showing up. I mean, that lack of self-accountability is one of the reasons I believe more people aren't reaching their full potential. Discipline and self-accountability, those two areas.
So let's back up. How did you get into this? What's your story? What's your backstory that, got you, first of all, to be so obsessed with these subjects? And then, obviously you've applied it to your own life to become wildly successful. How did Leslie become Leslie?
How did Leslie become Leslie? Well, there was 2 major milestones. First major milestone was back in my 20s. I was married to a contractor. I was a realtor. We created this very successful business. We were building high-end, $500,000 spec homes in California in the 80s. It was a good time to be doing that. And I had a very successful real estate career. One day, water moratorium because of a drought, similar to what we're having today. And so in a day, everything stopped. We couldn't build. He was out of work. Real estate went to hell. That was one of three things that happened. 6 months later, our house burned down. We weren't jumping out of a burning building. We were already at work, but there was a faulty water heater, and our neighbors saved our dogs. And the fireman brought my cat back to life with an infant oxygen mask. So nobody perished, but we lost all our stuff. Mm-hmm. And then, a few months after that, we were forced to go bankrupt because we just were not able to work. And it was the advice of all our financial guys that said, hey, you didn't do this on purpose. This is what has to happen. Mm-hmm. And so that bankruptcy, having worked and over 10 years, had a really super successful and happy life, and losing it all, like losing our career, losing our ability to work, then losing our stuff, that really changed me in so many ways. And that was when I found a mentor who she introduced me to personal development. I was 31 years old at the time, never dreamed of personal development, had no exposure to personal development. So I began working on myself then, which allowed me to start pulling out of the grief and the disappointment and the irritation. Now, the marriage didn't survive, and yet, which is another example of how people grow differently through trauma. And if we're prepared to work on ourselves, how that plays a role. But that's a story for another day. So that happened then. And so that was my interest in personal development. And then I began a sales business. I went into business with my mother, and we were selling in a direct selling company. And we worked together for the same company for 16 years. When those founders sold their company, Bill Farley, the former CEO of Fruit of the Loom, bought the company. Bill asked me to come in and be his liaison between the company and the sales field. So now I start doing corporate training. I did corporate field sales training for 8 years with 4 different companies. One of the companies, R&F, now $1.5 billion company. I was their first field development trainer. And so in the midst of all this learning and growing from, the early 90s to 10 years ago, I had gotten remarried and had what I thought was a marvelous marriage, been married for 15 years at the time, came home from a speaking gig to discover foot-long red hair all over the house. And as you can imagine, that wasn't coming from me. And this is 10 years from now, so I'm not going to break into tears, but at the time, it was beyond devastating. This is my second milestone. This is where I really was knocked down. And so as I started coming out of that grief, I took a hard look at my life and my passions and what did I want to do, and realized I'd become this risk-averse woman, and how did that happen? And so I just made the decision to start saying yes to life and gain clarity. What do I want to do? Well, I want to keep training, coaching, and doing what I do, but I don't want to do it in a corporate environment anymore. I want the freedom to do it in my own way as an entrepreneur, with more freedom to do it my way, with my feel. And so the timing for starting my own business, Jeff, would not have penciled out in anybody's plan. So the middle of the recession, I talked to a bunch of speakers I knew who were highly successful. They weren't getting gigs. I mean, I had 3 companies give me big 6-figure plus bonus offers. And I just had a conversation with myself that I want to do this my way. Like I started to practice what I preach at a high level. And so I started my business in 2012, my own consulting business. And I sit before you full of humility and gratitude. Since I hung my shingle, I've had more work than I could take. I mean, I literally have always been busy, even through the pandemic. I had one of my best years ever. It just has never slowed down. It's all referral based, which is the finest compliment. And I truly go back and think I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. They say our best lessons come from our most painful situations, or what Vince Lombardi always said, it's not whether you're going to get knocked down, because we know we're going to get knocked down. It's how we get back up. And I feel now it's not whether we get knocked down, because we are going to get knocked down. It's whether we get back up transformed, meaning choosing how we come out of adversity. And two choices: victim over here, woe is me, shit happens to me, it always happens to me, or champion mentality, which is what I chose, and coming out of each adversity and just staying true to who I am and having the courage to continue to march in the direction of my dreams.
Well, first of all, congratulations. Amazing story. You've overcome obviously a lot of adversity, and congratulations on all your success. You mentioned a word, trauma. I wonder if we could kind of like camp on that word for a minute. I recently made a friend who has become a pretty powerful mentor and influence in my life. He's a really good friend, but you know, he's one of those guys that sometimes I just call him and I ask a question and I just shut up and listen, you know, to his answer. And he's a former Navy SEAL, and he does a lot of work on trauma. And he started with himself, and he has a lot of pretty powerful theories around trauma and what it, you know, all those fears, by the way, derive from trauma, right? Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you could kind of maybe spend a little more time there. It's, you know, you said, oh, that's a story for another day. And you were talking about a particular trauma at a particular time, but in general, you know, in the work that you do with your clients, how much do you find that it's necessary and productive to deal with trauma, which nobody really wants to do, if they're being honest?
That's such a good question. This is what I call doing the work.
Yeah.
Like finding the courage to really do the work and figure yourself out and be prepared. Like I've done the work on the first divorce. I've done the work on the second divorce. And again, because of that, now 10 years on my own at 61 years old, I'm so open and so ready for Mr. Next to present himself. And I could have had the option that, you know, I could have gone the other way and been one of those bitter, irritated ex-wives, which immediately I chose, that's not me. That's not who I'm going to be. And so again, that trauma of that betrayal, I chose to do the work and come from authentic forgiveness, or at least get to. It didn't happen right away, but I wanted to get to that authentic forgiveness so I could look back and be grateful for everything we did go through, and truly get to a point. This isn't just words, like I've done this work so that I can look back and say, I'm glad it happened exactly the way it happened. Like the lessons of that trauma, because I was courageous enough to stare it directly in the face, is allowing me to have all the gifts of forgiveness, the gift of tolerance, the gift of more humility, the gift of gratitude. And so when I look back on the bankruptcy, which at the time was the most embarrassing thing I'd ever been through. I cried all the way to the attorney's office. I cried all the way back. I couldn't even say the word BK for 2 years. Now today, I could write a book on how to get your credit back. My credit is Herculean, purposefully. And at the time, like I said, to me, I likened it with getting arrested. You know, I mean, it was like, it was so embarrassing to me. And yet I was prepared to stare it in the eye, get my credit back, do the effort, do the work, knowing that this isn't what I'm going to settle for. You know, that's it. This is an interesting point. I have a whole chapter on settling, but to tie into what we're talking about now, you're talking about traumas and why that creates the fear that creates the life people are living. And in many cases, Jeff, if you think about it, or if they think about it, they're settling. Like they're not happy in an area in their life. Maybe they're not happy with the relationship, or happy with the work, or happy with the career, or happy with the health, happy with the creative expression. And yet things aren't bad enough. Things aren't painful enough. And so they settle. And I'm at a place, because of all the work I've done and because I do walk my talk to the best of my ability, that I am constantly questioning, am I settling here?
Yeah.
Or do I want this area of my life to look differently? And if the answer is I want it to look differently, then what am I prepared to do to make that happen?
So as someone who, I mean, we both know the work is never done, but I've done a hell of a lot of it myself, and I love it. I'm proud of it. I talk about my thousands of hours of therapy and my hundreds of books that I've read and my hours of meditation and my various forms of searching and stubbing, failing over here and trying over there. And like, I embrace the process now, but, and as an entrepreneur, I'm going to ask kind of a selfish line of questioning here for my own purposes. Just a heads up. I have you here, so I'm going to get some free consulting. So
my pleasure.
With but it's on behalf of my audience too. Like everybody, I think hopefully can benefit from this. So as an entrepreneurial, on my Instagram, it says, I always try to figure out, what do I actually do for a living now? Like, I don't even know. And so I finally landed on, I grow entrepreneurs. That's what I do. I grow entrepreneurs. And so I have found that typically the fastest, most powerful, most long-lasting and impactful way to grow an entrepreneur is actually to solicit them to come into the deep end of their own shit with me and help them do some really hard work to clean things up once and for all, so that they can actually go be the great entrepreneur that they are born to be. That is a really, really hard sell. And so I'm curious, how do you, as someone who clearly does some similar work with people, right? How do you sort of, what is your technique? I have my own techniques, but what is your method for authentically and transparently framing for people why they need to do this work and what they're going to get out of it, when they really just want to know, well, how do I get more customers? How do I close more deals? How do I make more money? How do I get my employees to show up on time? And they're asking a question up here and they really need to be digging down there.
Right. I insist on the personal development. I mean, I'm at a place, but I've always been, I'm at a place in my career. If I'm going to take a private client, if I'm going to take a corporate client, I mean, I get permission that personal development is going to play a key role. Truly, like when the way you should see your body language, you talk about the personal development you did, all that purposeful stuff you did. And it wasn't always easy, was it? And there was a lot of hard realities being faced. And yet, if they aren't prepared to do the work, they will not move forward. So the couple of things I do, not so much from a psychological, as it sounds like you do. I'm a data gal. I'm not implying that you aren't, but I'm a data gal. So I have them look at their data, right? Like the data doesn't lie. So are you satisfied with the pace of your business is a very common question I ask. Are you satisfied with the pace of your business? And then I get them to identify, let's go back 6 months. We look at the data so we can identify where they are not performing, right? Whether it's their sales figures or their reach outs or their calls or whatever. Everyone has different data points of income producing activities. Are you satisfied? No. Let's look at the data. Then I have them figure out, okay, I want you to look back over 6 months and tell me, what are all the things you do well? Like when it comes to your business, what are the things you're doing well? Like how are you really excelling, right? Like, are you good at follow-ups? Are you good at referrals? Do you have good language? Do you have good time management? Like, what are you doing well? And then I have them identify, where are you falling short? Like, where are you playing small? Mm-hmm. And this is where we really get in. So we build them at, like, you are doing good shit. Like you are doing things great. And yet the data shows that you're not where you want to be. At least where you tell me you want to be. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. We have to identify talkers from doers. Definitely. Okay. And I do that. We like, listen, if you're going to work with me, no judgment, but we got to identify talker or doer. If you're a talker, I'm not your gal. Right? If you're a talker at this stage of my career, I am not your gal. But if you are a doer, and if you are prepared to be courageous and prepared to do the hard shit, and you're prepared to experience all the wins and the success and the joy, I'm your gal. So what are we doing well? Where are we falling short? And where are you playing small? And then you got to give them time to sit with that. And if they'll be honest and where they're falling short and where they've been playing small, for me, that's a good place to start.
So it would be. Sorry, I can't even get my own joke out of my mouth without laughing. I was going to say, so you're a girl with data issues. No, but no, it's true. And you're right. I mean, it's always going to reflect in the data.
Well, the data, one more thing, please.
Sure.
The data takes the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
This is why we start with the data. You're not a bad person. You aren't doing poorly. You aren't lacking. Okay. First, the data just allows us to say, hey, you want to be here, and the data shows here. So it takes the emotion out of it. So allows us to really dig in and say, okay, if you truly want to be successful, we've got to improve in these areas. So that's why I like to start with the data.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know you can get a free copy of my book, The Millionaire Shortcut, which shows you the fastest way to become a millionaire in the new economy. And there's a special link just for this episode in the description. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. A line of objective, non-emotional questioning is a good way to lead to the hard emotional stuff with lower resistance.
Well, they're facing it. They're like, I want to be here, and my data shows I'm here. So now it's a choice for them. It's not a choice for me. It's a choice for them.
So let me roll back another question from hearing your story. So you said you were 31. You had the business collapse because of the water issue in California. Then you had your house burned down. You lost then your marriage. I guess that marriage fell apart. So that was that big low point. You had bankruptcy. That was when the bankruptcy happened, right? And then you said that you got involved in a direct sales business with your mom.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you said 16 years later, the person who bought the company wanted you to come do something. So that means you were in a direct sales business for 16 years.
With one company.
And
with my mother.
Company, and you did well enough that the person that acquired the company even knew who you were, much less wanted you to come do something for him. So clearly, I mean, I know the direct selling industry perfectly, not perfectly well, pretty well. As an internet entrepreneur, somebody who's done affiliate marketing, and I know how to run Facebook ads, and I know how to do all these things. I get hit up all the time by MLM, right? They want me to do this kind of stuff with their business model. And I don't, not because I dislike it, but just because I have other things I can do with it. But I know that statistically, it is extremely unusual to find somebody that marketed successfully with one company for 16 years and was obviously a top producer in that company. I mean, that's like a 1 in 100,000 or more type of result. Is that, am I getting that right? Like you were 1 out of 10,000, 1 out of 100,000 or something like that.
I don't know if it's,
come on.
I don't know if it's that, if this numbers are really that true. Now, does everyone go to the top? No, but that's not a reflection of the profession. That is a definite.
No, I don't mean
right.
Just being successful makes you 1 in 10,000. I mean, being in the same company for 16 years and getting asked by the person that bought the company to come do training for the company.
It was unique for sure.
That's an extremely like unicorn level result, right? So there was something there with Leslie even before, like, were you doing personal development all that time?
Yes. It was when I got into direct selling is when my mentor talked to me about personal development.
Okay.
And I remember the first book I ever read, Louise Hay, The Power is Within You. Like I read that book cover to cover in an afternoon. And if you could see my library right now, 90% is all personal development books. And then I do like adventure books, like the people that walk across Antarctic or swim across the ocean. I like people who like really dig deep and find their best. So I started with the personal development and boy, were there areas in my life where to Craig Valentine's quote, letting my good enough get in the way of my great. That was really my big takeaway from all my personal development, that I was not living up to my full potential.
Yeah, it's funny, and this show called Millionaire Secrets, which I'll give a little spoiler for some of my audience. We're actually going to change the name here pretty soon, and rebrand the whole show. But regardless, the same show. This all started as really an exercise for me, kind of a Napoleon Hill type of exercise. Like let's get successful people and let's really dig in and find out what makes them successful. And after, I don't know what episode this is, we're coming up on like 200 episodes now. What I found is it's all almost to the point of being boring. It's like all the same stuff. Like all these wildly successful people, they all do the same things. They get up early. They have morning routines. They do personal development. They think bigger. They think differently about themselves. And for me, I'll say that in the last few years, coming up with what seemed to the old version of me to be a pretty ridiculous idea of what I could possibly go out and do, and actually saying, oh, that's what I'm going to go do. And then, oh my gosh, I actually am pulling this off. But like, I feel like I will spend the rest of my life, perhaps we are yoked together in this quest, trying to help people see how big, well, what's your book called? Your book is called Outrageous Achievement, how outrageous they could potentially be.
Yep.
Like, and that word outrageous, I love that you picked that word. The word outrageous, it means like the word outrage is like anger. Like for me, I'm like pissed off. The old me would be pissed off at how much potential he was wasting playing small. It is outrage. It's producing of outrage. You know,
it is producing outrage. Most people are not happy with one or more areas of their life. They know it.
Yeah.
They know they're not living up to their full potential, even if they don't articulate it that way. They're just unhappy. They're dissatisfied with their health or their relationships or their career. They're settling. They're dissatisfied. And the grief or the irritation or the drinking too much or the partying too much or the denial or the settling, it's just all because they're not prepared, or they haven't challenged themselves, or they haven't found the right mentor, or they just haven't been pissed off, to your point, enough to say, all right, today's the day. Like, enough already. Look at all the stories of success we hear, the people that lose 100 pounds, or the people that change their career, the people that go all the way to the top. There's a day, like I've interviewed hundreds of successful salespeople, and every single one of them, Jeff, in their own words, in their own way, said, there was a day I made the decision to change, to go after it, to clean my business, to lose the weight, to find the man, to find the girl. Like, there was a day when I made the decision. That's all it takes to get started. Like, there's a lot more after that. Mm-hmm. But to move in that direction, people have to make the decision that today's the day I take charge of my life.
So we're talking about that day. You had that day, right? And it was on the aftermath of all these hardships, right? I remember that day for me. It was November. I'd have to go look it up on a calendar because I can't remember. It was a Monday. I think it was November 22nd, 2008. And I was at rock bottom. I had lost 2 franchise restaurants that I never should have started in the first place. I was $500,000 in debt. I was overweight. My wife was leaving me. I had gotten evicted from my apartment. I was just, a total mess, right? And I remember the day. And it happened. I was in the middle of the night. I was checking my email. I clicked an ad in my Gmail. That was back when Gmail, well, maybe they still do. I have G Suite, so they don't do it to me. But, they run those ads inside your email inbox. I clicked one of those ads and I saw one of those empowering videos on the internet that, like, you can do it. You can make a business. And I was just like, fuck it. Forgive me. I was like, I can make a business. I could have a different life. Right. And it was a crazy day because I remember it so clearly. What's that? 13 years later now. But I always think about that day. It was so miserable to get to that day. And for you, it was so miserable to get to that day. And so I'm trying to help people experience that day, but I don't want them to have to get so miserable. It's like you said, I think you said it, they haven't felt enough pain to make that change. And I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, but damn it, it's exactly what I needed. It's exactly what you needed. So should we just be going around trying to make people's lives harder so that they'll finally be miserable enough to change?
Oh dear. No, I say the same thing. It's like the people who have the near-death experience, and then all of a sudden the sky is bluer and the leaves are greener and the birds are singing. And I always say, well, how come we have to have a near-death experience? Why can't we live that way every day? So I do believe it comes down to a choice, clarity. And again, you've got to do the work, man. You've got to do the personal development work so you can figure out, who do I want to be? How do I want to walk through the world? Who do I want to attract? What do I want to be doing? Where do I want to live? How healthy do I want to be? I mean, these are choices that must be made. Our life is purposeful, right? If you're if you're just going where the wind blows you like a tumbleweed, then don't be surprised if you're overweight, underpaid, underloved, unhappy. I mean, it's truly about taking charge of our life. We're in charge. Like, I'll tell you what drives me. I'm a lot older than you. I'm 61. Like, I got 25, 30 years left, really, maybe more, but let's just say 25, 30 years left. I don't want regret. That's what drives me. Like, I don't want to regret, shoot, I could have wrote that second book. Oh, shoot, I could have done that TED Talk. Shoot, I could have done, like, all the vision, all the ways that I want to serve and help. I don't want to have the regret. And that drives me. Like, now is the time for action. And that's really where people must be. But that's a level of choice. That's what it really boils down to.
Well, I'm 19 years younger than you, and I can tell you that I'm driven by the exact same thing.
Yep.
Regret. I cannot imagine something worse. And you know what? I will tell you what did it for me. You say there's a day, but even after there's a day, there's still inflection points, right? And what did it for me so I had that day and I changed a lot of things. But then there was, I think the day I realized regret, the tragedy of regret, was the first time I was ever face to face with death. Like, I had a relative, a family member that, because I was doing reasonably well and I had a nice house and we had extra space, they came to live with us for their last year of life after a terminal cancer diagnosis. Mm. And I'd never really been up close to see a person die before. And that was when the word regret really clicked with me. Like, that is literally going to be me someday. Like, I'm going to be I withered away and dying and thinking about my life. And man, you nailed it. That's the word. So do you have, I'm curious, like, what's your modality? Like, well, actually, never mind what you do with other people. What did you do to yourself? You read a book. What'd you say it was called? Like, The Power Within?
The Power is Within You by Louise Hay.
Clearly it was.
Clearly it was.
So what did you do? Like, what was day one of Leslie 2.0?
Okay, so Leslie 2.0 was 10 years ago after the divorce, after the red hair debacle.
Okay.
And so I came out of my grief. Like, I was as knocked down as I've ever been. And still had this little voice in my head because of the work I've done. I had this little voice in the back of my head that says, Leslie, this will allow you to be the best Leslie you can be if you choose it. That little voice I could still hear under my sobbing. And so I realized, I sat down, I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of writing. Who am I? Who do I want to be? I mean, it was so interesting to discover. At the time I was 50. And I had started that year, my 50th year, with what I thought was a great marriage and a super good job and money in the bank. And so here I am, December of the same year, I'm getting a divorce. I had to quit my job because I just, they pay me to be perky and inspirational, and I was anything but. And I was walking along the bay. And so that point for Leslie 2.0 was this walk along the bay. I live in San Diego. And I'm staring out at the bay and I'm crying. And I had this epiphany, Jet, that I couldn't remember the last time I had done something risky or out of my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And I had realized how risk averse I had become in all areas of my life. And that got me thinking about, how did I become her? Like, how did I transform into this risk adverse person who, even though I was doing big stuff, it was all within a bubble of comfort. Like, I hadn't quite blown through my bubble. I was doing way better than I was, but I had not fully blown into my full potential bubble. And so I am not recommending this to your audience. We all deal with epiphanies like that differently, but I literally stamped my foot on the sidewalk and said, I'm going to do the scariest thing I could think of, which turned out to be jumping out of a plane. And so 3 days later, I went skydiving. And if you saw the video, it's really quite funny. I paid for the video, and the guy, we're walking the plane, he's like, so Leslie, like, what are we doing today? And I said, jumping out of a plane, Matt. And he says, was this your idea? Which I just wanted to, like, no. But I said, yeah, it's my idea. And I found myself to just start venting. I turned 50 this year. I started menopause. I got a divorce. And I thought, shit, I better jump out of a plane. And you literally see him take a step back. Now, after the fact, I thought, oh man, he's got to see irritated 50-year-old menopausal divorcees every friggin' day of the week, right? But that day, I was the one. That jumping out of the plane changed everything for me. Like, I did the scariest thing I can think of. And even after he pulled the chute, like, he dropped 120 miles an hour till however long his odometer says to pull a chute. When he pulled the chute and it went super quiet, and I could see all the way out to the desert, all the way out to the bay, and all the way into Mexico. Like, it was just, and I just had this thought, I am doing the scariest thing I could think of. Like, I made sure to be present, and it changed everything for me. And so I realized after the fact, I realized after the fact that even though I was doing the work, I really hadn't discovered my courage. And once I realized that, all bets were off, man. There is nothing that I want that I am not prepared to go after now. And that was my missing component. I was doing the work and I was doing great things and I was successful in work, but I hadn't really tapped into my full courage. And that skydive really started it for me.
Wow, that's such an interesting, really, that really connects with me, that observation of the difference between doing the work and then sort of finding the courage, which to me is it's kind of the next phase of going, okay, I've done the work. So now why the hell did I do that work?
Exactly.
What was all that work for? Just so that I could be a little better at the same? No.
Right. Exactly what it is. When I talk about this from stage, I say what I learned that day was the perception of what's possible is on the other side of fear. We only get to truly live our best self if we are prepared every day to move through our fears.
It's so true. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so powerful. This journey that I'm on now, which, has resulted in Entre Institute, which is one of the fastest growing, one of the bigger private education companies in the world now. It's crazy how much we've grown. We're less than 3 years old. It started when I shot this video on my phone. It wasn't this phone, it was an older iPhone. And the video, I shot it in like the beginning of September 2018. And I was like, it was my jumping out of a plane. I was so pissed off about just frustration. And it was kind of like you're saying, I had done all this work, but I didn't really feel like I was getting the payoff for the work, because what the work does is it increases your potential. It doesn't increase your result. Yep. So that's the outrage, is I was starting to get outraged that I knew I had done the work. I knew I was a more potent, powerful person, and I hadn't gotten this result. I wasn't having the impact that I wanted. I was doing well at business. That's very different from having a big impact.
Right.
And I went out in my car, and I call it my Jerry Maguire moment. I had a total freak out, and I was like yelling at my phone. And there's like, if you go back and watch the video and slow it down, you can see like spit flying out of my mouth. Because I just put the phone on the dashboard I took my wife's car, and I'm just out driving, and I'm like yelling at the camera. It's like this 11-minute video. And then I was like, afterwards, I got back to the house, and I'm like, what did I just do? I just yelled at my phone. Like I recorded myself having some silly rant, like a tantrum. Well, what am I supposed to do with that? And I realized that for me, jumping out of the plane was to post it online, was to let the world hear how pissed off and done I really was. And I posted it, and it's still on my Facebook page. Any of you listeners, you can go back and look at it. It's from, I think it's September 21st, 2018 is when I posted it. The video is called Let's Get Extreme. It has almost 400,000 views on Facebook. And it basically launched, for me, what's become a movement to build the world's first school for entrepreneurs. It's an institute of higher learning. We've had over 150,000 students.
So great.
because I've met, for me, that was my jumping out of a plane. And that's what happens when you finally have had enough of being scared.
Yep.
And it wasn't yelling into my phone. It was uploading it to Facebook.
Right.
That was the leap.
It was declaring that was your leap. Yep.
Yeah. And so do you have any exercises? Cause I mean, like it's this rubber meets the road thing where it's like where the spiritual meets the tactical and the existential meets the tangible. And,
Yep.
and I know that you, just like me, have got to be passionate about facilitating that experience for other people.
That's why in the book, Outrageous Achievement, there's 11 exercises and 10 chapters.
Cool.
And they can download the exercises into PDFs. I mean, I believe it's so important to not just hear something and like something, but you got to take ownership of it. So I'm all about what you're saying is.
So is your book kind of, I mean, it's called Tapping into Your, or Outrageous Achievement, Tapping into Your Limitless Potential to Create the Life You've Always Wanted. Is your book kind of a how-to guide to get people to that place?
To get people through their fear. It teaches you how to overcome your fears and live your best life. I take you right through all the fundamentals. We deal with the fears, and then we talk about the law of attraction, and then we talk about core values. I mean, we overcoming adversity, living with passion. I mean, I really take you through, and there's tons of stories I share throughout and lots of exercises. It's just, it's a journey to a higher level of potential for sure.
So if you've never wanted to jump out of a plane, don't read this book. Because you might find yourself jumping out of a plane after you read it. And by the way, as someone who's also jumped out of a plane, I will say, I don't know that I'm going to do it again because I broke my tailbone when I landed.
Oh.
But it was even broken tailbone and all. I'm so glad I did it. It was the coolest thing ever. Like you talk about when they pull the chute and it just goes. And it's
I know. From so loud and so frenetic to. I would definitely do it again. I would do it again for different reasons. I am fundamentally a different woman today. So I would do it again, but for different reasons.
I think I could do it. I'd have to really deal with the fact that breaking my tailbone was one of the most painful things I've ever dealt with.
Yeah, I'm sure. But what are the odds of that happening twice?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like something malfunctioned. It was just a kind of a weird freak thing. Yeah. I could do it 1,000 times and it wouldn't happen again.
No.
So I'm not saying that to scare anybody, but I will say, I think if I did it again, and I'm curious, you could probably say this too. I think I could do it now with no fear.
Correct. And
There'd be adrenaline,
right.
But I don't think I would experience it as fear. I think I would just experience it as an experience.
Right. I agree, because it's not the unknown. What is the main reason people are so afraid of? Unknown. Mm-hmm. They don't, and they're making it all up in their head. Right. So that's what keeps salespeople from making a call. The unknown of what someone's going to say. That's what keeps people from, calling somebody back, or it's unknown.
Or
so
asking somebody out. They cute. Like
exactly.
The unknown.
We have done it. So we don't have that unknown factor against, like you said, there wouldn't be the fear of the unknown. It would simply be the adrenaline of still doing something that takes us a little bit out of control.
Well, this has been so cool. So unfortunately we're winding down to the end. I want to make sure everybody knows, first of all, how can they get more access or information, or just to follow you? How do they find you? And then also, how do they get your book? Please share.
Yep. So I've got a website, lesliezann.com. I'm big on Instagram, Leslie Zann. I'm on LinkedIn. Those are the main areas, social media, that I am on. To get the book, simply go to Amazon. We've got the print copy. We have the ebook. I went into the studio and recorded the Audible. And so, because I just know my community and they like to hear my voice and my energy and my laugh. And so, the book's available on Amazon. And if there's really the people that I work with now, Jeff, or, any company that has a sales team, any company that is looking for a fresh voice or a strong women voice or a motivational voice that's truly customized to the company. I just don't have generic presentations and I go out and walk the stage. I really customize my presentations to fit the needs of each particular company. And I'm actually going out for the first time since the pandemic next month. It's going to be great to hit the stage again. And, you know, my admin, one of my top admins, she says, when asked what I do, because you said earlier what you do, when people ask what I do, Kathy says that I get people to believe they can do what they don't believe they can do.
Ooh, I like that.
And that is a great gig to have, because it really is coming from authentic service on my part.
So I have to ask, because I have a book coming out in the spring, and I've been thinking a lot about going into this. It's funny you said that, because I've really been obsessing about, like, I'm going to have to go in a studio and read my own book out loud, because I want to record my own. How long is your book? How long did it take to record the audiobook? How painful was that process? Like, did you have to stop and start a lot? Did you have to drink like honey or tea with honey to keep your throat hydrated? Like, I want to know about that.
Okay, so first of all, I am a professional speaker. That's what I do for a living, but I am not a professional voiceover. And I know the difference. So I never questioned that I was going to do the Audible. And so I made sure, it was not excruciating ever. It was nothing but a pure joy, the whole experience. So my book is 10 chapters with an intro, preface, and an epilogue. So we figured it was going to be 3 days of recording, because even professional voiceovers, most people can't go more than 4 hours.
Okay.
Right? Because you lose your rhythm. Right. You start getting tired, and you not only get voice fatigue, you get brain fatigue. So we split it into 3 days, which we got it out in 3 days. And then I listened to the whole thing and redlined or yellow lined, earmarked the places where I didn't think it landed well. Right. Because I have a good ear, even though I'm not a professional voiceover. So then we had one day where I went in and redid everything that didn't live up to my full expectations. And my producer actually said that 90% of what I caught was good. So I never worked with him before. I couldn't go up to Irvine to work with my regular producer, who knows me, who knows when to stop me, because I've done this a lot. But because of COVID and the pandemic, I chose a man in San Diego, a studio here in San Diego, where we were masked and I was the only one in the studio, and he's in his room and I'm in my room. So we had to do it a little differently, but I was not going to miss the opportunity to have the voice on the Audible. So you find a good producer if you've never done this before, and you give him full permission to correct you when you don't land well. That's the key. But most people have their ego and they just want to keep going, but not everything lands well if you're not professional voice talent. But I think you're going to do a fine job doing your book.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I the way that ego thing, I keep telling myself, like, I'm basically living a dream. And I've actually thought a lot about this. I don't actually think you can have ego in a dream. And so if I just keep reminding myself I'm living a dream, there's really no room for ego. So
that's a very interesting way to think about that. I'm going to noodle on that for a while.
Yeah. I haven't totally resolved it, but I think there's something there. In fact, I'm not like a lucid dreamer, but there's been times in my dream when I've remembered, like, oh, I have some theory around dreaming and self-awareness and identity, and I try to find ego in the dream and I can't. So there, that's our deep thought to end the interview, right?
If you love entrepreneurship, then you'll want to keep watching. So click the next interview right here for some more Millionaire Secrets gold. Thanks for watching.
The mind isn't complicated at all. Once you understand it, you can actually fix really complex matters if you understand those three workings of the mind and put them into practice.